Hello YouTube, this is Matt Pullen, and I'm going to make another chess video now about the Queen's Gambit declined Marshall defense. It starts out d4, d5, c4, and then knight to f6, and white plays c takes d, and we're looking at knight takes d. And we looked at, in the last video, the move pawn to e4. And the best continuation for black would be, to play knight f6, attacking the pawn, and after knight c3, play e5. And this move appears to, the tactics appear to give black a decent game. So it is considered to be too early to play e4 in this position. In fact, the modern treatment is to play knight to f3 first, controlling the e5 square. And this is considered to be the refutation of this defense for black. I mean, white intends to play e4 and knight c3 without the possibility of black getting in e5. For instance, most games in this variation, black will play e6, and then e4, knight f6, knight c3, and then bishop b4 pinning to put some pressure on the e4 pawn. But white defends with bishop to d3. And in this position, white has a pretty safe advantage. If black tries c5, to put pressure on the white center, hoping for some kind of an exchange on d4, then white can play a3. And this move gets the bishop pair. If black plays c takes d, then a takes b, takes, and white has a bishop pair and a strong queen side. Meanwhile, if black exchanges on c3, now white has a strong center. Black can also try this move queen to a5, intensifying the pressure on the pin on the knight on c3 and also pinning the a pawn to white's rook. But white can call black's bluff on this one, and he can play a takes b. Alright, you were pinning this pawn to my rook. Are you really going to take my rook? Well, if black does, then the issue is after knight d2, the black queen has no escape squares. And the issue is that white is threatening to play knight b3 and then just capture the queen. So in order to prevent this, black needs to throw away an additional piece with knight takes e4. So this variation with c5 a3 is good for white. That's just one sample line after e6, which is the most common move, sort of giving white the center. There's also this move bishop to g4, which also gives white the center, but hopes to set up some counterplay. After e4, knight f6, knight c3. Actually, the best move might actually be e6 here, but after queen b3 attacking the weak b7 pawn, white will get an advantage. There's also another move, knight to c6 here, hoping to actually threaten to take this, after bishop takes. But, there's another video made on YouTube, called Queen's Gambit Marshall defense about this very variation. And the point is, black's knight c6 is good intentioned, but after d5, the only consistent move would be for black to play knight to e5, putting more pressure on the pinned knight. But again, white can call black's bluff. Okay, so you're pinning this knight. If I move it, are you really going to take my queen? So knight takes, and now, there's no choice, otherwise you just lose a piece. Bishop takes d1, bishop b5 check. And now if c6, then white just plays pawn takes. And he's threatening to play c7 discovered check and take the white queen, followed by taking the bishop. Otherwise, after that, he'll be up a piece. So instead, if black plays queen to c7, preventing that push, there is pawn takes pawn discovered check, knight to d7, and now, take a rook for check, queen d8, and bishop takes mate. So, yeah, that's that trap. the combination of bishop to g4 and knight e5, not a good idea. Because white has a superior position in the center, any tactical try for black, it's, possibly fail. Alright, so what else is there to talk about in this variation? The most common move is bishop to f5, contesting white's plan of playing e4. And in Marshall's day, most of his opponents played knight to c3. For instance, there is this game Reddy versus Marshall 1924, which continued e6, queen b3, attacking, knight c6, and now e4. Because if queen takes b7, then there's this knight b4 move, threatening to trap the queen and also to get a rook in the corner. So e4, e4, knight takes, pawn takes, knight d5. And now Reddy could have taken on b7 today. And if this knight trap comes in, then knight e5, threatening bishop to b5. That was a strong continuation. Reddy unfortunately played bishop to b5. And after bishop b4 check, bishop d2, a very complicated position arose, which black eventually won. But I'm not sure what Marshall would have played if queen b3. This is considered, today to lead to a sure advantage for white because of the attack on the b7 pawn. If b6, for instance, then knight d2 threatens to play e4, which would threaten to play a bishop to b5, taking advantage of the weakened light squares. So knight to f6, defending against this e4 move, and now knight to e5. The idea is we're threatening mate on f7. And if e6, then e4 threatens the bishop and also bishop to b5 check. So after bishop to e6, white can just play queen to a4 check, and he can get a pretty safe advantage because of his center pawn majority and the weakened light squares around black's queen side. So knight b6 is actually the most common move, after which knight to c3, there's no need to play knight d2 in this variation. White can just, because there will be no exchange on c3, white can just play for e4 right away. So bishop to e6, and say queen retreats, g6, e4, bishop g7. And now it makes a lot of sense for white to play h3 to keep this bishop off of g4. Because otherwise, what will this bishop do? It's not easy to see a plan of development for black, because he doesn't control any center squares. So white will just follow up by developing, bishop e3, bishop e2 castles. So I think Marshall would have liked to play knight c6 here, the point being, queen takes, knight to d4, again threatening the queen trap and also this fork. But after knight d2, again, with the idea of playing the e4 piece fork without subjecting white to a trade on c3, knight f6 preventing the e4 move. But hey, e4, look. White can play it anyway. And in this position, Rybka actually suggests that the best plan for black is to play bishop c8, defending the b7 pawn. And if d5, then play knight to b8. I don't have any, words cannot describe how I feel about this continuation. But let's look at what happens if knight takes. Then there's d5, which, well, actually, we'll look at bishop takes first. Bishop takes is simpler. Then there's just knight takes, queen takes b7, and black has too many loose pieces to survive. See, and there's knight takes e4, then d5. This is the critical idea. All right, what else? What is there? If black just retreats the knight, Then we have knight takes knight, bishop takes, and queen a4, winning the bishop. This is a tactic that we've seen before, isn't it? If knight to c5, then white just, it's a counterattack on the queen, a defense of b7. But white just plays queen c4, and black has two knights hanging. So after d5, knight takes is best, then bishop takes, and this knight, the only safe square is to go to b8. Now, queen takes threatens the rook in the corner, so knight d7 is forced, and after knight d4, white's advantage is pretty obvious. Well, this has been an exploration of the Queen's Gambit declined Marshall, and maybe you can see, based on this, why the Marshall defense is not popular today among strong players.